Hello, welcome to another episode of G.I. Joe New News Review. I am here again with my special guest in a series of interviews, Hawk Sanders, publisher of Rising Sun Comics. Thank you again, Hawk, for spending time with us and taking time out of your schedule to do this.
It's my pleasure. It's my pleasure. I love talking about all of this. This is what gets me up in the morning.
Yeah, it gets me motivated and up in the morning as well. I wish I could do it more often than I do, but that's just life, you know how it is. So we've been talking in a series of interviews over the last 3 weeks on different subjects. First, we were talking about Action Force Redux and all that encompasses, and then we moved on to GI Joe and all the fingers and toes and everything you got into all these different pies. And now we're going to go into your mainstream publishing of comics through Rising Sun Comics. Let's begin. Um, what is a little bit about your background? I want to know more about you and how you got into Rising Sun Comics.
Well, I my background, I'm actually a toy designer, is what I am. I got my degree at Otis Parsons or Otis in Los Angeles. Um, I had two choices. I could either go to FIT in New York, and I got accepted everywhere I wanted to go. Every school accepted me. I even had some that I didn't apply to that I had some acceptance to.
Wow,
So um, I was doing really well scholarly in those fronts.
it's good.
Uh, so I decided it's either beaches and bikinis or or is going to be snow boots and and frost frozen cars. So of course I decided beaches over New York.
Yeah.
So um,
Well, you could have come to Florida.
well, there was only there were at the time there was only three colleges in the country that did toy design in this country.
Wow.
Uh, there was just three, and I think there's only two now. Actually, the other one's gone.
Wow.
So yeah, I went there, graduated, and then of course worked in the toy industry for a while. And really, I am a I love doing toy design. It really is my thing. I absolutely eat it alive. It's great. I love the whole process behind building it up and what it is and what it isn't, and following all of that. So after that, I of course been senior designer at several places and kind of worked my way up to chief designer at a few companies. Um, and But during that time, I've always enjoyed comics. I think there's those things that kind of bring you joy and happiness, and if I really look back at it now, those seeds were planted a long time ago, long time ago, and I doing comics is really fulfilling on this. Toy design's one aspect of it, and yes, there's creative to toy design, but it's not necessarily the creative that you think. You don't have you don't get to do just whatever you want. There's parameters in your design. Comics is a lot more free. You can really do whatever you want to put on that page can be put on that page. Whether or not it's accepted, it's a little different, right? So that's comics. Comics is way more freeing and more fulfilling as far as the art side of things go. You're definitely getting invested in what you're creating. So I'd have to say, if I really think about it, my first comic was probably I think it was a Daffy Duck, or no, it wasn't Daffy Duck, Donald Duck. It was a Donald Duck Walt Disney comic, is what it was. I remember reading it, but I didn't really get into that. That wasn't the one that really hooked me and sold me permanently in comics. Um, I remember going to a yard sale, and I had started reading comics at that point. My friends had comics, and when I went to their house, I would be able to read theirs. But it was a little hard to get because I lived in such a shut off community from the world that getting comics was really challenging, you know, to do. So I remember going over and I was reading their, I think it was, they had started their Transformers comic. They had a couple Transformers comics, one or two G.I. Joe comics, but I didn't own any G.I. Joe comics at the time. And then I was like, well, I got to be able to find some of these. So I started hitting up yard sales. And I found a Fantastic Four #1 of the record edition, and that was kind of like my first holy grail of comics. Look what I've got. It's a #1 Fantastic Four record edition, you know. And then I began slowly kind of building from there. Loved Superman, obviously. G.I. Joe was probably what was the hook for me. Issue 109 was
109.
yeah, it
That
was that
far.
late. It was that late that I got
Wow.
into it because you couldn't find them where I lived. I mean, you had to go to a much bigger city, or you wouldn't call it a city. You would call it a town. I had to go to a town to find a comic, and the first one was 109.
So you
And I
lived in like a rural area and there was no comic shops in the area?
no, there wasn't any comic shops for 2.5 hours, three
Wow.
hours.
Yeesh.
So there's no way for you to get any of those things, you know,
When
anywhere
was
around.
this again? What year exactly was this?
Yeah, I started, that would have been like 84, 85 that I really was into, started reading comics, I would say.
Well, G.I. Joe 109 had to have been in the 90s, though.
That's right. That's right. I didn't actually buy my first G.I. Joe comic until 109. And I went into a Kroger's store and it was on a turn dial. And
Huh.
at 109, I had always looked for them and I couldn't find them. I could find comics whenever we went this far, but 109 was my first one. I still
You-
have it. It is the most loved comic of all time. Like tattered pages, it was read over and over and over again.
and
Continually read.
you never could subscribe through the subscriptions that they had in the comics at the
I
time.
think I think it was just where we were at. We were so isolated from everything that I remember asking parents for it, but that's really a parent's thing that they've got to agree for you to do.
Yeah.
I remember seeing the Ladybird. I was into GI Joe, but there wasn't really a lot of reading material. So I found there was Kmart, and I found a Ladybird book, and I wanted to do my book report on Ladybird GI Joe GI Joe reader, and my parents told me absolutely not. You're not doing that. So I didn't even get that, but you know, so it was kind of a cut off from that whole thing. But once I got issue 109 and I knew that they were stocking those pages, I was able to then go back and start filling in and start picking up stuff. So it was really late that I finally got to read the Larry Hama run. What got me into creation and art, and this is going to sound a weird one, but it is the thing that really made me do it, would be G.I. Joe Extreme by Dark Horse, because I was there during that era.
The dark era.
The dark era, and they were putting out. They had them in the local, not the local drugstore, but the town's drugstore. So it was still 3 hours away, but they had them in the town drugstore. And I opened it up and I saw Frank Terran's art. And whatever it is inside Frank Terran's art, man, it just like all sensors were like I was on fire at that point. Like, I mean, I loved it. It was like I didn't know anything could be so interesting and moving and yet still grounded. And it was like it was art that spoke to me on this level because it had so much movement to it. And if you go back and you look at it, because he did The Last Wild Man, or which was the last story. He also did a bunch of covers, but I loved his Last Wild Man. They were so gestural and so open into its fluidity of the ink and the way that it laid on the page and the way that his brush strokes were set on it, that it could be anything, but yet it couldn't be anything because he still had definition enough to ground it. It was just so moving to me. Interesting later enough that I began loving more of that gestural art in that form, the movement of it. Interesting though, later on, Frank Tarrant says that his art really wasn't fully accepted by the consumer because of those aspects. I was reading an article on him. He really didn't see that he had to change his artwork to become something more that people were willing to accept.
Well,
Because
if I remember correctly, Wildman was an Epic production. It wasn't actually through Marvel Comics. It was through Epic, and they always tried to break those boundaries of art and writing and storytelling in Epic Comics. It was an imprint of Marvel, but that his style was very unique. I don't think it was like way outside the box of what was going on in the mid '90s when it was released, but it wasn't, I don't think, any revolutionary style or anything. There's other artists that are in comics at the time that were fairly revolutionary. So that's interesting that you say that.
well, Frank Tarrant, the story it was in that last GI Joe issue, GI Joe Extreme issue. That was the last Wild Man. He actually had a long run on Aliens and Predator. Frank did,
Then
and
I'm getting confused with the Wild Man comics series that were through Epic. So
you might
you're
be thinking
talking
of
about the
Andrew Wildman.
Andrew Wildman. He worked on the original GI Joe as well in the
He did,
30s and 20s and stuff like that. Yeah, I know who you're talking. Sorry, I got
but
totally mixed up with what you were trying to say. I apologize.
yeah. So Frank Tarrant was really he wanted me to go like his artwork spoke so strongly to me that it wanted me to do comics. Like I wanted to be that. And I'd really tried to do that. It was kind of like a real eye opener for him to say that after he finishes his run on, I think it was Predator and Alien, he really couldn't find another place to land, and he really had to change his artwork after that. It becomes something different, and now I think he actually does gaming, is what he is. So he's not even in the penciling side of
Now,
things.
if I'm not mistaken, he was a product of what is considered the big gun and long legs and big breast era of comics, the action pose females and big guns era. His style in the mid '90s, that's what I remember about his art and his style. He was a product of that, like the Rob Liefeld, the Jim Lee, the Silvestri, that period where it was all these long legs and big guns and big breasts, things like that. If I'm not mistaken, is that accurate?
He come out of that era, but I don't think that was really his artwork. There was a lot of people during that time that was really pushing that, but if you look at his artwork, it feels more like Joe Kubert. Kubert
Joe
is who it
Q.
feels like.
Hmm.
Yeah, his artwork has more of that in it. The inks are rough and gritty, and they, sometimes they don't necessarily stick to position of what you think they would, but yet it doesn't hurt the art any. Um, You'd have to take a look at his work. But anyway, he was my influence. He was the thing that got me moving into wanting to do comics and wanting to do art. I was already interested in art, but to see that it was something that really kind of lit a passion within me. And obviously here we are, so many years later. And so that was how I got interested in it. Rising Sun, like we've said previously, it started out in the early or late '90s. About 99, 98, we were doing like fan stuff online, and there was four of us that were involved in that. And everything you see on Rising Sun now had grew out of those four people. Continuing to stick together and continuing to promote and continuing to create. And we were just doing fan stuff online. So Rising Sun has a very humble roots as being a fan driven comic company or a fan driven company that has grown it into what it is now. Um, so that's just a reiteration of some things I think we talked about in a previous episode. Guys, if you didn't see those, they're probably somewhere. Scroll below, you'll run across them, or look up David T. Allen, you'll run across some of those other interviews.
Thank you. You're doing my job for me. I appreciate that. That's the executive boss man type personality that you're dealing with, Hawk Sanders. So thank you very much.
You're welcome.
So so we're now 25 years, roughly 25 years from those humble beginnings of Rising Sun. Now you've been branched out into licensing. You're branched out into 4 different countries and regions. You're doing a lot of independent, different types of comics. Talk a little bit about your publishing uh, history and what you have going on.
So, Rising Sun originally, it was Jamar Miller's, baby, and I took it over. Jim Marshall, who was one of those core members, took it over for about a year, and that was about 2011, I think. So, and I asked to take it over from Jim after that. So 2013 or so, I rebooted everything. I said that if we're going to survive as a comic company, we need to look at doing this differently, guys. Let's build something new. And what I did was I put we built a charter, we built a board of directors, and we built a board of investors, behind the company, and rebranded it so that it could handle something different. Well, out of that, it began to grow in new eras. So yes, we do have a UK, a division. We have a New Zealand division. We have a Japanese division. We have the Rising Sun US. We have Rising Sun Nonprofit, and we also have some sub companies that have joined us along the way. We have Enemy Transmission, which was producing comics previously. We have Red Handed Studios, as well as we have what we call our studio groups. And those all serve different purposes under Rising Sun. So the idea is that we wanted to create our own IPs out of all of this. So this allowed the company to expand in many different directions and to cover many different genres. And some of the divisions of our company handle different things in different ways. Rising Sun US is PG-13 only books, so they only put up PG-13. Rising Sun New Zealand deals in things that are a little more adult, yet they might have horror comics over there. They might have things that are a little darker, a little more suited for an adult audience, as well as they kind of focus on the New Zealand native community to kind of build that up. Rising Sun Japan is primarily manga, and so, or yeah, manga. So I always get them all confused, but so this allows the company to have many different things entitled in it. Red Handed Studios focuses on high quality books and trade paperbacks. That's kind of more their thing of what they're headed off into. And Rising Sun Nonprofit is where all of our GI Joe related books kind of fall into. The studios allowed us to branch off and have other companies join us without necessarily having to be owned by Rising Sun. We don't own those IPs. We are publishing and printing those people out into the world. So the studios have many different studios have joined us along this path. Sandman Studios, we've had Douthat Press was one that's put out a lot of books through us. Let's see, Night Raven. So you can find a list of those people on our website of who actually published through us. And if you out there in the world, you've got a book and you're thinking about it, you should always check us out. We have many different options where, to publish works and to get them out into the world through everything else that we do. So, did that answer your question, David?
Yeah, it did actually. It sounds like you're kind of like Image Comics, because Image Comics brings a lot of creators in there and they print their comics. There's a certain percentage that Image gets for publishing and printing and stuff like that. But then the creators kind of keep their creator owned rights and stuff like that, and they just pay for those costs and things like that. So that seems very similar to the model that you're going with. It's not, from my perspective, as well known as Image, obviously. So is that something that you're looking into, broadening that visual, that vision of a rising sun, and getting it further out there for people to find?
Most definitely. And I wanted to. I'll talk a little bit about that. Um, some of the studios they don't. We don't. Some of the studios only do creative interior works. Rising Sun US has creative interior works, but it also does publishing deals. And there's a difference between publishing someone and and being a publisher of someone. So some of the books that we have are licensed IP that we have brought in and have contracts with those people to create those books that we put out there. And we don't do a lot of that anymore, but we still, if the IP is good enough and the following is good enough, just like any other publisher, they would grab that IP up and help cover the cost of printing, help cover the production of getting that book done. Things like our studios, we actually don't own any of that IP. That IP is just, is allowed to publish through us, but those individual companies themselves actually own that IP wholeheartedly. So things like The Seer, if you're looking at it, that's owned by Douthat Press. They're the ones that put it out. Things like Red and Green is actually a licensed product that we have brought in for publishing underneath Rising Sun. So two different gambits, two different facets. But yes, we are actively all trying to push out there. When we came into this in 2013, there wasn't a lot of favor, I don't think, for a lot of people sticking together and building up together. In this, there had been a couple tries and everything about putting together companies in order to move forward. So you talk about 2011, where we're really getting moving in the think of having our own IPs to publish that aren't related to licensed product, right? So that's, if you're looking at our website and you're wondering, well, what are those? That is Red and Green again. That is Armadillo Justice. That is Collapse. That is Black Lotus Empire. Those are comics that we put out ourselves, that we've created those IPs in order to put out ideas that we want to generate. Henry the Cantankerous Hamster, things like that. But yes, we put together these many different options so that we could get companies together and move forward. In the 2011, there wasn't a lot of that going on. Or if they were, they didn't last very long. They would come together and then break apart, Comicsgate wasn't even a fully solidified footing at the point that we started. And I think Comicsgate now has changed so much from what it was, when it starts to get big to what it is now. They're two different things as well. We've gone through many different changes. So we are trying to grow, and we want people to join us and help us move this ball forward, help us to get indie comics out there. And we're looking for people of like-minded thought to join us in this path, because this is fun and it can be rewarding and it can be profitable if it's all done the right way.
And that's a tricky thing. Back in the day, it was a very difficult thing to try and get into, say, Marvel and DC in the 80s. And then all of a sudden Image Comics comes out, and there was a bunch of other smaller new publishers, Valiant, Malibu, and stuff like that in the early 90s, that helped a lot of creators kind of break into comics. And companies like yourself are that new company that's kind of that place to break into comics. So then when you go to try to get published through Marvel, DC, or whoever, independent companies like Image or Dark Horse or Boom or Oni or whatever, they're going to be like, oh yeah, they have something under their belt. They have this work that they did, and they've uh, honed their craft, and they've got published and stuff like that. So it's those beginning steps for people that they could, if they wanted to get into comics, they could go through you guys, and there's many different options. They can have their book published, they can have a book printed, you can hire them as an artist, an inker, a letter, a colorist, a writer, what have you. You have all these options available for people that really can't get into those big name companies.
And well, we've had a lot of people that have came to us, and we have groomed them into the industry, teaching them the things that they don't know, teaching them how to process better. Of course, this is a rising sun process, but there's still some standards that the comic industry has that you need to know how to do. And a lot of times we get people coming in and they don't know those things. So we do teach them how to do this and take them through the process. Um, and you know, a lot of people, they ended up honing their things, and then all of a sudden it's like, hey, I got the call. Marvel wants me to work for them. I'm being picked up by this other studio, and of course I want those people to go out and better themselves and grow, beyond that. And I think that that's very important, that should those people come along, that we want them to go and further their career. And then we get to say, well, we had them first. Obviously it's a feather in our cap and a feather in theirs. So yeah, we do take on a lot of people that are just breaking into the industry and try to get them. It doesn't mean we can have everyone, but we try to always reply through HR. I think always replies to everyone that comes through. And that is a choice by us to say, you're not just going to hit a brick wall when you get to us. You're going to get a response. Now, whether or not you get to come on or not, that really depends upon you and what you're looking for and what you're looking to do. But you will get a response.
But on the other side of the coin, you actually, Rising Sun Publishing has also had a lot of mainstream creators that have been in the industry as film writers, animation writers, comic book professional artists. I've had discussions with you, and there's a plethora of professional names that you could throw that have worked with you guys. So you're not a fly by night. You've got established creators, people in the industry that have worked in your for you and with you over the last 25 years or so as well.
Oh yeah, most definitely, and that keeps going up, and we still have more people like that come back and return to us. Just take a look at our Action Force Redux project. It's all A-listers. So go check that out if you haven't seen it. Actually, perfect timing. There's a Kickstarter running right now. You can go check that out. There's an Action Force Redux Kickstarter. You can go look at that beautiful artwork, and you can actually support that book by buying cover 4A is what we're trying to fund right now. Need a little help with that, but fund that. And then you have a bunch of add-ons afterward that you can pick up all the other books of 1A and B, 2A and B, 3A and B, and a lot of extras after that. Some even more books, for you guys to jump onto. But
since you broached that a little bit, I've been watching, or I guess watching is the right term, as Jim has been posting every day another couple of pages and kind of reading it along and looking at the art and looking at the story. And it does not feel, and I have tons of comic book knowledge. I'm going to say knowledge behind my history, not experience, because I've never been a comics published person or anything, but I know comics inside and out. And this stuff really does look like it could be a Marvel DC staple of comics every month. It is beautiful. Coloring is beautiful. The writing is beautiful. The art is beautiful. So I have to echo what you're saying, that check this stuff out. It's beautiful, and you're not going to be disappointed. If you love GI Joe, if you want to delve further into the echelons of GI Joe history, Action Force Redux is that type of book.
Oh yeah, most definitely. That has threads tying back to even before, before GI Joe was really formed. So there's a lot of good things in there. Good writing. It's good art. Just check it out. You'll be impressed. So
So let's talk about a few of these books you're publishing actively right now, and the creatives behind them, that ones that you feel that people should notice. You want to get noticed yourself.
oh, I want people to go read them all. But I think what's important is that they understand that supporting an indie publisher like us, that money doesn't, that money goes, more directed to us and allows us to do more things, allows us to grow further. Um, I think that, the some of those books that you're looking at is, and I'll talk about a few of them. I'll just highlight a couple because there's so many. I'm going to highlight maybe one out of each category. Collapse. Collapse is a book. It's a post-apocalyptic series. We are going on 12 issues now. It's on a little bit of a hiatus, but we're not going to hiatus that in GI Joe, which means it doesn't come back. It really is just on a hiatus, and then we're going to pick it back up again. But it's 12 issues. So what it does is it approaches the concept of, nuclear fallout has happened and everyone has been changed by the nuclear fallout. And what we did is we based a lot of those changes upon real life anomalies that have happened within humans. So there's a group of survivors that are non-changed as they've been living in the bunker. And what happens when those two worlds collide? Everyone wants to focus on it like, well, okay, here's the norm and this is the abnorm. Well, it kind of spins that theory on its head, and you see how it all unfolds, throughout this. So it's been a really fun series to work on, really well received. The guys writing it they absolutely love it. Well, it's interesting about this book because because I had two writers and then we were working on it, and this is in the early part because I've not always been tied with the company. There's been different people running the company at different times, but Jason Long ran it for a long time. We've had several people that have run the company, and so there was this idea that they were both writing, and it was like, well, there's just something missing out of this writing. There's something not clicking, like with one of the writers was not clicking. And then I'd read the other guy's version because usually I have two or three writers working on something at one time and to see what's working. And they're not doing full outlines or anything like that. It may just be brief synopsis to see what's going to work. And I thought, you know what, none of this is working. We sat down and we had discussions. And I don't remember if it was Jason Lindsay or someone here on staff that said, what if we put these two together? So I said, hey guys, why don't you join up? So I put the two writers together, and that's Russ Pazowick and Richard Foster. And I put them together. And they become this star, phenomenal writing team together that they couldn't have done. There's no way they could have done it separately. But when you put them together, they were like superpowers combined. And all of a sudden, they got this blowout, amazing scripts. And I kind of feel, and I'm not going to talk down about the book because you guys really will love it. If you're reading it, you're going to like it. It's, I think you're going to like it. I kind of went back and said after they had started laying things out, I said it's really good. I want to go back to issue 1, and I want to make it more character focused. So I had actually had them rewrite issue 1 because I thought, what if we get people so invested in our characters that they couldn't put the book down? So I had them rewrite it to be more character focused and moved a lot of the story plot elements further back so that it would pace differently. And it's such a mixed bag whenever you read that first issue, because some people's like, oh wow, I was so into the characters, and other people, well, it just didn't have enough story plot. And I was like, I think I missed it a little bit. Stick past it, issue one. If you're going to order issue one and two together, and read those two together, because I think that makes a more full piece. After that, I let those guys run with it, and they have created such an amazing story from book 1 to 12 now.
That's an interesting series. We discussed it a while ago at AR, and I find it a fascinating thing. It's kind of like I'm not sure if my audience is familiar with the old movie Freaks from 19 like 20 22 or 21 or whatever. This movie called Freaks, and kind of the comic book that Jack Kirby created in the 70s called Command D. It reminds me of a combination of the two of those things with a little bit of Walking Dead thrown in there. That is what I would describe this series as. It's very unique, very fresh in my reading experience. So I was very excited about it. The fact that you were using real life mutations. These are all things that, to a certain extent, have happened in the real world, you know. And I don't want to spoil any of the stuff, but it's a gripping series in that way, because you look at people that are sick and have these deformities and stuff like that, and in today's society they would probably be shunned or what have you, but in this society they are the main society, and then these people in the bunker have to come out and they have to uh, uh, um, get involved with these characters, and it's very interesting.
I was just pulling up the reviews, guys, on my phone while David was talking. So it's got 4.5 reviews on Amazon. So go check it out. So I
So
wanted to get that right.
what's the
Um,
next project?
I want to pull one up out of Red Handed Studios, because we have a bunch of books underneath all of us, but Red Handed Studios actually has one called Dead Reckoning. And this is a little bit of a Western kind of front for it. And you may not have heard this, but you can pick it up on our website as well. But this is you know, if you like The Mandalorian, then this predates The Mandalorian. But if you like The Mandalorian in that aspect of the cowboy sci-fi western, that's what this story is engulfed in. So this is very much in that kind of vein. So I kind of feel like it takes one part of Brave Star. Do you remember Brave Star, the old TV animation series? And it takes one part Brave Star and mixes it with one part Mandalorian. Oh, there you go. There you go. So it's called Dead Reckoning. It's out of Red Handed Studios. Very high quality book. I think that it's definitely a way to go there. Um, and then of course we've got The Circle from our New Zealand staff, and this is a 6-part series that you can find on our website. This is from our New Zealand guys, created by Aru Sai. He's actually the director down there. He's been with the company a long time, and this deals with 4 friends and them trying to, it kind of deals with what happens between these 4 friends whenever there's a murder between them. So it's more suspense, and it deals with some darker topics, right? And how those things kind of work out. There's also Purgatory, which is another book that we put out last year that you can go pick up, trade paperback. Purgatory, of course, deals with purgatory. And this book was a lot of fun to work on, because we were really playing around with color palettes and how it all works and all of this. So there's a long journey of understanding how purgatory is put together, as far as not the book itself, but the story.
Right.
So it takes you on the path into this idea of the purgatory book. it can be kind of a fun read, a little bit of a haunting kind of read um, in that. Douthat Press, of course, I'll to pull one out of the studios. Douthat Press has The Seer. The Seer series is 8 books. It's a little bit kind of cheesecake art, but it's fighting monsters and superhero esque front on it. So you can definitely pick that up as well out of the studios. And there's so many back there to check out of the studios. This is just one of many. But you can check that out. You can also check out Destroyer, which is by Sandman Press out of the studios. That you can look at. All of these things can be found on our website. So, and I would like to let everyone know that with any of these projects that I'm talking about here, these help keep Rising Sun's doors open. You supporting one of these books, any one of our books on our website, especially these of creator owned stuff, that helps grease the wheels of Rising Sun overall to help do it. And I really encourage people to really step out of your comfort zone and say, okay, look, they're an indie publisher, support indie, buy indie. And that's how you support. You buy one of their books, consume it, and if you don't like it, give it away. It's that simple. Give it to one of your nieces, nephews, aunts, uncles. Let someone else read it. That's another great way to say, hey, I read it, I didn't care for it, or I loved it, and I'm going to give it to someone else and let them enjoy and read, you know.
Cool. Sounds like you got a little bit of something for pretty much any kind of reader. And I think that's the hallmark of a great publisher is to try and reach all the audience and not just cater to one audience with superheroes or one audience with horror or one audience with action fantasy or what have you, because publishers have done that. CrossGen was mainly fantasy. Yeah, it was action fantasy, but and they tried to cover a lot of different genres with that, like archery, Sherlock Holmes, sci-fi, martial arts, this, that, and the other. But it was all fantasy based.
Yeah.
So it feels like you are not doing that. You're doing all different types of products. You're doing anthropomorphic animal storylines. You've got different type of western, a different type of apocalyptic, the not the same type of fantasy, and you're obviously doing licensed comics and stuff like that. So is that a concerted effort on your part to diversify your publishing portfolio for that reason, to get more eyeballs, get more people involved?
Most definitely, yeah. We did that on purpose. And I think every publisher, I'm certain there's going to be people that are publishers that are looking at small ones, and I think you have to do that. We decided at some point along the way, there's no way that we can create every book we need, to diversify and to get out there. So we created different programs that allowed people to join us, and along this path. So having a little bit of everything means that we have at least something for everyone. And the goal has always been that we can all get there together. With those people that are involved with us. That we want to put out the best books that we can, but we're all going to move that way as one unit. You know.
And I've seen that theory, that thought process a few times. There was a toy company that I supported a Kickstarter, and their line was, if everybody supports us together and we all get involved, then we're all going to move forward together with this particular toy company and so forth. And then there's been comic book publishers that have been similar, like Image Comics, the Finding Seven Fathers of Image Comics. They got together, the bandy together, and they moved forward. And Image Comics is nearly 30 years old now. So there is something to be said for a cooperative initiative to try and overcome a difficult goal or difficult task or whatever you want to call it. Especially in the comic industry, it's not an easy thing to do.
Yeah, I definitely think that that's the case, and now I think by everyone joining, it allows, think about this. Think if you're a comic store owner, right? Think about this from a store owner point of view. You come to them and you've got a book. And this is what I kind of looked at. You've got a book and you want me to buy your book and put it on my shelf, or you just want to leave your book behind. That's wonderful and that's great. You're seeing if there's any value in it. But for that comic book store owner, if he did that for everyone coming in, it's going to be really challenging because he's trying to keep his bottom line clean. So he can't necessarily do that all the time. So the thought process is that if we have more people involved with it and we're approaching comic shops, then they have a catalog that they can order from. Here's many books you can put on your shelf. You don't have to buy them all. You know, choose what you want to put on your shelf, and us as a company together will help support you in that. So if you are a comic shop and you're looking this, we do have full buyback from our comic for people that buy wholesale only, guys, wholesale only, full buyback. As long as the book isn't damaged, we buy it back 100%, and we've stood behind that word. So so whenever COVID hit and we lost half of the comic industry, we actually did buy our books back for those people that wanted us to buy it back. And that definitely hurt us in being able to move forward. But we kept our word. We did what we said we were going to do. And it's sad that we've lost so many comic shops. But, the point of this is for you as a shop owner, if you're watching this, there's no risk that you're taking with Rising Sun. If you buy in with us, and as long as those books don't come back damaged, it's 100% buyback for your wholesale money. So there's no risk. There's no risk that a comic shop has with us versus leaving it behind with someone else. They may not have that guarantee. They may not have that support. They may not have the infrastructure in place to be able to handle it. Where Rising Sun has human resources, where it helps deal with things that are going on. We have a sales department. We got a little bit of everything that kind of helps guide us along that path. And if you're looking to work with Rising Sun, we have many different gamuts of that as well, where we offer our artist contracts and we really try and hold to those contracts, or do hold to those contracts. So that we're putting out and want to work with the best people and want to, get that all done to the best of our ability, everything that we do. So the comic industry itself, this is more controversial topics, maybe, about the comic industry itself. I've noticed some changes. We've talked about some of these topics previously. I don't know. You want to go into that, David?
Well, the industry as a whole has changed and they've moved a lot. Sales have gone up, pricing has gone, distribution has been broken for quite a while. Even with Marvel and DC, both Marvel and DC are going through private distributors now. DC is DCB Services, and Marvel is Penguin Random House, I believe, or something like that, out of New York. And so the distribution and the supply chain issues have been broken for at least 2.5 years to my experience, because I don't get my comics the way I used to get my comics. I used to get them every 2 weeks for 17, 18 years. It was every 2 weeks, and I could put it on a calendar and I knew when it was going to arrive. And some days they would be a day early. That's how good it was. But nowadays, I don't know when my comics are going to arrive. I don't know when my box that was shipped out last Tuesday is going to arrive. It's just a crapshoot as to what that happens. And Diamond, as a company, distribution company, is not the same as it was. They have lost a lot of footing, a lot of faith, because they're not keeping up with their agreements, their contracts, and things like that. And a lot of comic companies are having lots of issues. So that's the stuff that I'm aware of.
Well, with Diamond, everyone asks if we were in, are we in Diamond? And we go to a lot of comic stores and they ask us that same thing. Are we in Diamond? And my answer is no. We were once in Diamond, but we're not in Diamond anymore. And the reason why we're in Diamond, and we may go back to Diamond if Diamond will have us, we'll see after this, but I got some very strong opinions. we've been in the industry long enough that we've seen how Diamond treated people in many different formats. And for us as an indie publisher, they didn't treat us very well for a long time. Now that they've lost DC and Marvel mainstream, distribution, they still have, I think, they have some portion of distribution back now. I forget what it is, but they lost those, and then they were looking to indie publishers, but they didn't treat us very well previously. We got the bottom of the barrel. Marvel, DC got the primary. There's many different things going on and behind those lines at Diamond that really made it hard, to do. Some of their business models didn't really work well for an indie publisher. We always got put to the back of the book. It was very hard to get anyone to pick you up in the front, and you had to pay higher prices. It was not really a good situation. So I'm trying. I don't think that I'm bitter about it. I'm just very cautious with where they're at and seeing them destabilize after losing those two big publishers when that was their primary set. But it's not just their fault either. It's also the comic shops. The comic shops are showing signs of shrinkage, I guess. They're showing signs of this as well. Many comic shops we go into will ask, well, I only do business with Diamond. I only do business with Diamond. Well, I don't think they can say that anymore in the last couple of years because it's not true anymore.
No, they have to definitely deal with DCB services for DC Comics, and they have to deal with Penguin Random House for Marvel. So there's three distributors that they have to deal with right off the top.
So that brings me to my next point. So when they're telling you that they only deal with Diamond, or they're basically saying that they might not have as much faith. Let's look at the numbers over the past few years because I think this is really interesting. The numbers overall. So here we go. Diamond's overall on February 7th, the top 4,000 comics. It says that there was a 36% increase to $600 million, which was sold of nearly 50% more copies than the year prior in February 7th of 2022. So they're saying that there is actually an increase overall in the direct market rebound between 2020 to 2019. However, if you look at the total comic sales overall, where's that number chart list? Here they are. I'm reading them off.
If they're using 2022 as their parameter, they're publishing
20.
2 months in 1 month. That's the problem there. That's why it looks like there's more, because you have to order 2 months worth of Marvel in one previews or 1 month's ordering cycle. That's not the same thing.
Well, the problem here is they're comparing that to 2020. There's 2019 was the pandemic, but it really didn't kick in until 2020. And the problem with that is half of the market is now gone. Half of the stores are gone.
Yeah.
So comparing those numbers at that, because if you really look at the fall of the comic shops, it didn't happen in 2019. It happened somewhere around in 2021, 2020. This is not what happened. So, they're comparing January 2020 versus 22. And what they've said is Dynamite has a 61% increase, and Boom has a 45% increase, and Image has a 191% increase. IDW is a negative 6%, and others is positive 14%. However, those Marvel titles projected sales were 124,000 copies of Doctor Strange. They only sold established units 44,000.
Well, there you go. You obviously know why IDW is in the negative, because they lost all their major licensing, Transformers, G.I. Joe, whatever else.
Right. And so my point is the comic shops themselves, I'm seeing less support of indie publishers overall. And I think that what you're heralding to me is the same thing. That Diamond Distribution is having a hard time fulfilling everything that they've got. Comic shops don't have as much faith in supporting that. So
Well,
around here,
there's
I've
more
done.
to it though. Sorry to interrupt. There's
Oh,
also
no,
the
no, go ahead.
printing costs have gone up. Paper costs, trying to get bulk paper, has gone up. Shipping from overseas, which a lot of publishers do their printing overseas for certain things, that has gone up for gas and so on. So there's a lot of other factors that are involved with those numbers, the reasoning behind a lot of this stuff.
Yeah, there's a lot of rise in those costs, but that doesn't explain the stores not really wanting to in my opinion, they're not really willing to support indie. So the last time we talked, I told you I went to, what was it, 10 stores, 14? I don't remember how many
What
around
was
here.
it in California, right?
California, 14 stores. Only one of those out of that 14 had a indie publishing set. Now I've been to a few more. I can say that 3 out of 15 stores have an indie section. So it's a little better than one out of
And
that.
and I
But
think I've mentioned this. I said you should really come to Florida and do that
yeah,
experiment here. You would find way more independent sections in comic shops than you have found there in California, which is disheartening for the indie publishing industry. I'm sorry for you guys.
that well, I think that in talks at a few of these shops, because I do talk to the guys whenever I go in, or girls, or whoever's working. We actually had an indie store here, and they closed down last year.
Uh,
They only had indie comics. That's all they dealt with, and they actually shut their doors as well. So I think what we're seeing is that the comic shops feel that only Marvel and DC are really what's selling, is what I'm seeing. However, the numbers support the fact that the consumer is actually buying more indie than they are prime line now.
I, I
However, the comic
I can
shops are
speak
not
to that.
carrying it.
But I can speak to that because I spend, I don't want to say how much exactly, but I spend an exorbitant amount of money on comics, and my piles of comics, as an average, my Marvel pile was always my biggest pile, and then my DC pile, my indie pile was maybe 5 or 6 books every 2 weeks in my box. Now my pile has kind of even. My pile of indie books and my pile of DC books have almost caught up with my Marvel books, because Marvel has lost faith with their publishing. They don't put their books out on time. They don't put their books out monthly like they were doing regularly, and there's a disenfranchisement with Marvel publishing at the moment. And then now you have to order 2 months in a row, and it's weird. Marvel's getting having issues. Sorry to talk about Marvel, but those are the facts from
No,
my
no, no,
perspective.
no. I definitely brought it up. So, but that's what I'm saying though is that we're seeing the numbers for indie are increasing. However, the stores are reluctant to carry them. What I'm saying is that the stores need to change their output. They need to rethink what they're doing because it's not working for them. Their projected sales numbers, they're buying more copies than they're actually selling. They need to stop doing that and think of this market differently. And it brings me into my next discussion, because these are really heavy topics to discuss, right? I see the markets as two separate things. Mainstream market as Marvel, DC, and personally myself, I see things like Dark Horse and Valiant and publishers like that. I see them more in the mainstream. They may be at the bottom, but they're more in the mainstream realm. Versus indie publishing is something completely different, and the way that those two markets buy, the way that those two markets sell are totally different. You're going to have guys that will only buy Marvel, and that's it. That's all I buy is Marvel. And they'll tell you, I only buy Marvel. They're not even willing to give another book a chance. And it could be because they're buying so much Marvel that they don't even want to attempt to spend any more money, or vice versa. You've got guys that are only buying indie, and they won't buy Marvel anymore, or DC, or Dark Horse, or anyone else.
It
And
is true. It is true. I've talked to many people over the years, and there are those strict people that are DC or Marvel, and they may get an indie book if it has to do with a TV series or a film. They'll dabble. They'll dabble in these things that become mainstream just to see. Oh, is Walking Dead good? Oh, okay. Is Umbrella Academy, is that good? Is whatever fresh thing that's being done as a TV show or a movie or a cartoon. They'll dabble in those type of things. But there's a way of the breadth of indie publishing, in my opinion, and not from your perspective because you're looking at it from a different perspective. Mine is I'm using Diamond as my barometer. Like you said, Valiant. There's Dark Horses, Image, Boom Studios. There was IDW. There's a lot of other ones, Xenoscope. There's a lot of other ones in there. I'm not mentioning all those, but there's material in all those that are good. Aftershock, a lot of interesting new stuff in Aftershock.
Yeah,
A lot
for
of these new publishers over the last 3 to 5 years, there's a lot of interesting stuff out there, and people have to be willing to try to at least give them a shot, help them stay out there, so the industry can be a better place for comic book creators, because not everybody's going to be able to work for DC and Marvel. It's just the fact. A lot of these other companies, they give a lot of artists and a lot of new ideas and a lot of new writers and people the opportunity, and we wouldn't have Umbrella Academy. We wouldn't have a lot of this stuff if we didn't give Lock and Key. We wouldn't give this stuff a chance. Dark Horse has been the forefront of a lot of these things for decades, since the 80s. Dark Horse. I can't say enough about Dark Horse and their independent works and things like that. So
and I reiterate that, with the idea that you would have a hard time getting in Marvel and DC. They're probably not going to take you right out of the hat. You're going to have to prove yourself, and you're going to have to go into the trenches and work yourself up with a smaller company before you can ever get there. And that's what I want them to do. I want you to solve your anatomy issues before you start drawing Batman. You know what I mean?
if only Rob Liefeld had you guys when he got in. Sorry, Rob. I love you, but
I think that it's really important that be the process, not to just snatch someone off of the streets and that doesn't have anything. They need to kind of work their way up. But I think also I think that the mainstream publishers need to begin to look at this differently, in my opinion, as well as the consumer needs to look at it differently. In order to support the industry, you can't just support this pillar anymore. This pillar is getting smaller. This pillar, if you don't support it, is held up by both of them. You're going to have to do it, or else we're going to lose our comic industry. Totally.
I don't know how long DC has with all the changes that they've gone through over the last 7 years. I'm amazed that they're actually making comics. They're definitely not making them at a profit. I know for a fact they're not.
Well, the numbers I'm seeing, on one title for DC, that would have been a blink of an eye for a book coming out even 10 years ago.
Well,
so we're seeing
let's use GI Joe in the 80s, right? Let's just use GI Joe because this is kind of a GI Joe thing. But GI Joe in the 80s was selling over 1 million copies per issue from about 85 to about 89. They were in the top 10. They're probably in the top 3 selling comics in the history of comics from beginning to end at that period of time. You might have some Batman titles, Spider-Man titles, Superman titles, really close with G.I. Joe. Superman had slipped quite a bit. But nowadays, if a book was doing 30,000 copies in the 80s during that period, you wouldn't even last 3 issues.
Right. Exactly. And those, Now they're looking at 20,000 copies or 7,000 copies is considered
Yeah.
a really good run. Guys, I hate to say it, that's a far thing than what we were even 10 years ago. That's a long distance.
Yep.
That's a lot of sales down. But I do believe that it's a double hook sword here. We're dealing with problems in both sides of the field, right? I personally myself, and I'll bring it back as we have this discussion. I would like to have DC and Marvel be the pinnacle of where you want to get to. That should be the pinnacle of where you want to get to.
Of course.
I expect that art to be really good. I expect the story to be phenomenal, the writing to be really good, and I expect that team to be solid together. And I personally would pay more per book to have an extraordinary book rather than paying, you got five Batman titles. I've used this expression before. You got five Batman titles. I'd much rather have, or 10, probably 10 Batman titles. I think last we checked it was 20. I don't want 20 Batman. It's laughable. It kind of is laughable. DC, if you're watching this, you're becoming a joke. Stop doing this. It's laughable. 20, no one needs 20 Batman titles.
But that's the thing. You're 100% correct with your thought process, because I like certain characters and I support those characters uh, pretty much without fail, unless I feel that they ruined it for me or whatever. So I like the Tim Drake Robin. He was my Robin from the early 90s after Jason Todd. So I support that Robin. So they put out this new series. The art isn't that great. It's not up to the standard that DC I know can publish. And I
Should be.
felt bad. I'm like, I supported this book. I'm buying it, and it's not grabbing me the way I want it to grab me. So it speaks exactly to what you're saying. If they had put out a better book and a little bit higher price and got a quality artists and stuff like that, maybe it could have been a better product. I don't know.
Well, I myself am willing to pay more money for that better artist and a better written story. I would pay more dollar per book, even though it would only be 22 or 24 pages. I'm willing to pay more to read. Okay, that good one. Give me two Batman titles, not 10. Two. Give me one where you're going to try something new. Give me one that is really solid. So that way I'm still invested. And I think that G.I. Joe did this really well under IDW. That's exactly the process that they approached. We had Real American Hero written by Larry that continued on the mainstream series. And then they could try whatever they wanted with the other run. And they tried many, many different things. Some were successful, some were not. And I think that that's the approach that needs to be made. Flooding the market because you're afraid of losing market share is destroying the industry.
Yeah.
You don't want that. You don't want that. You don't want to close your doors because you were too greedy or because you didn't think of the future or because you didn't look over it. We've got too much of that in our society already. Take two steps back and think about it. What you guys want to put out. And it's the same thing for Marvel as well. We don't need saturation of the market.
Well,
We
I think
need
you're going with a little bit of a different formula, even though I think it's just as detrimental as the DC formula. Marvel, instead, they'll put out 4 Amazing Spider-Mans a month, and then they'll make you order 2 months worth of books at the same time. So I think they're really kind of padding their numbers to make it look like they're doing better than what they are. And some of the artists aren't that great there either. Like the Eternals, Avengers, X-Men crossover. There were some artists that I was not happy about with that series. And that's a
yeah,
premiere series, that
it
big
should be, yeah.
crossover, and it's not that great.
It should be. It should be really amazing. And everyone's going to come at me and probably ask this question. So I'm going to try and answer it. What determines a good writer and a good artist? Because everyone's going to have a different opinion of what that might be.
Very subjective.
But it is subjective to the person, right? But I think we can all agree that there are definitely better writers than others, right?
Yep.
If you need an examples, Tolkien versus Max Brooks. I like Max Brooks' readings, not bad. Tolkien is definitely better. Okay, so that's the pinnacle of where you want to get to. That should be our DC. Not that Tolkien's going to rise from the dead and write DC or Marvel books. It's not going to happen. There's a story idea for you guys. Go with that. Anyway, but you want a very good writer, someone that's really well known to us and really well perceived and liked and can come up with really good thought process and story for us to follow. And you want an artist that's paired with him that we really enjoy. And what defines an artist that's worthwhile? Well, the artist that's cut his teeth, the artist that has already drawn these things and have solved how all these problems in anatomy and flow of the story, composition, story pacing. He knows the process really well and knows how to put together a book that's really moves you through the story fluently. So those are the things that we're talking about here as far as how our industry grows and what we're talking about changing in it is it has to change on all levels. We want the industry itself to begin looking at how they're building books differently. We want the stores to begin thinking about how they're selling books differently. And we want the consumer to begin consuming the books differently at the same time. Otherwise, I really do think that it'll collapse. I think that it's showing signs that it is going to
We're
almost go down to nothing,
we're definitely in another one of those periods. It seems like the industry has these periods like every 20 years or so where they're reinventing themselves. Marvel and DC reinvented themselves in the 70s, the late 70s. They reinvented themselves in the late 90s because of the collapse of the comic industry and almost the destruction of the comic industry in the late 90s. And they are definitely reinventing themselves and trying to figure out what is the position they need to go forward, because as a consumer I am not as enamored with comics like I was in the 90s. I had a friend who was a comic collector, and he got his comic itch in the 70s. And so he was just kind of going away from comics in the 90s. And I thought, oh man, why would you want to do that? There's so much cool new stuff coming out. This Kingdom Comes coming out. They're doing this with this book. They're doing that with that book, whatever, you know. And now I'm in the position where he was 20 years ago in the late 90s, because I'm getting to the point like, do I really need to be buying all these things because they're not grabbing me? Yeah, I'm supporting Batman. Yeah, I'm supporting Spider-Man, Superman, whatever, because those are things that I've supported. But I can't always do that. I can't be that person that is obsessive, compulsive, always is gonna put my money towards something just because I have 1,065 issues of Action Comics. Do I want to continue that? If the story and the art and the product isn't earning my $4.99 that it costs to buy that, I think that's a big question that DC should be asking themselves, and Marvel definitely needs to be asking the same thing.
It's most definitely, and that's kind of why I stopped collecting Superman, because that was one of the books that I had to give up for that very reason. You know, you kept collecting, it kept moving in the story because Superman had 5 titles that were simultaneously intertwined. That you had to pick them up in order to follow the story through, and it becomes an overload at some point. And I see what you're saying about the collapse. I think that the real difference is the 90s boom happened right at the time that it were right before, or right after those guys decide that it's not their world. And then we hit the 90s boom. But you really think about what came out of that 90s boom. A lot of those concepts and ideas held through. A lot of the things that we're buying today are still some of those concepts that came through the 90s boom.
Sure,
They
there was
crashed the
some,
market.
there
Yeah,
definitely was
they
some
weren't all duds.
stuff, that was created in the 90s. I'm not saying that there wasn't, but because of the comic industry as a whole, the companies, Marvel, DC, Diamond, as a whole, and those are three of the four foundational positions of comics, and they still are kind of today, that they didn't want to think outside the box. They didn't want to change, and the industry almost collapsed. They were forced to change, and I think they are going to be forced to change. Again, the fact that Diamond has lost Marvel and DC, they had to pivot and adjust and figure out what they were going to do. And they added a huge manga section that was not in there. There was a couple of pages of manga before, but now there's this astronomical section, probably about 30 pages of manga in there that wasn't there before. They've incorporated publishing with all the indie section of comics, so they want more books in there, they want more prose novels and that type of material, so they are pivoting because they're trying to become more of a I don't know, graphic novel publishing company like Barnes and Noble and places like that. And what Amazon has done with trade paperbacks and book publishing and stuff. So Diamonds is pivoting towards that type of business. And I think that's smart on their part, but they also have to give the support to more indie publishers to get more voices, more new voices, and more new visions out there.
Well, they're not. Well, Diamond is no longer the only game in the market either. We also have Lunar, and we have Morris, and we have several other people that are publishing now and have distribution ability. And even Rising Sun itself has a small distribution ability to get books out to stores. So we were already walking down that road of saying, hey, we need to solve before Diamond had their problem. We were already saying we need to solve this problem that Diamond's created for us, and we began trying to address it ourselves. And I think that we were somewhat successful in that. So don't think that just because that there's other options out there is what I'm trying to say, guys. That it's not just Diamond. You have Lunar. You've got other distribution networks to tap into. And I think that it's probably a really good thing, because when it was just Diamond, it was kind of rough. It was really rough. You were kind of like dependent all upon whether or not Diamond gave you favorability or whether or not they were going to deliver on time. And there's so many problems listed with it, whether or not you hit your quota print numbers. And I think those have definitely changed in Diamond and how they handle that. But overall, I think that I know that's a divergent, but I think that our industry and the comics itself, I don't really want to see it go down. I just think that it's pointing that way. That if we have to have a change on all fronts, or else we're going to see a collapse of it. I mean, come on, a 6,000 copy book is considered a success now.
They wouldn't even blink an eye at that. If they said that that was the numbers, it wouldn't have even gotten out of the print. I'm sure at
Right,
Marvel,
right. They would,
it wouldn't have.
yeah,
But
they would have canceled it. They would
yeah.
have canceled it. Yeah.
So what do you feel the future of Rising Sun Publishing and Comics is? You're the perfect person to answer this.
I think for Rising Sun, we are going to continue to expand. We've been working on several new titles that'll come out. Obviously, I think we're going to do some more Kickstarter projects in order to help fulfill. A smaller company doesn't have as much money as a bigger company, right? And we are still a small fish in this pond. So, by doing some Kickstarters, it allows us to kind of fill that in. We're probably we're going to continue working with the GI Joe Collectors Club and continuing to work with them. Hopefully, we'll continue to grow in that way. We are thinking about either approaching Diamond and putting us into Diamond or Lunar or one of the other distribution networks because we need to reach more stores. And obviously, I think that we want more companies to join with us along this path. And our thing about it is that let's say you had a book and you put a book out 10 years ago. There's probably readers today that have never even opened or know about your book. Shoot us an email. Let's put it into our gambit of books that we're publishing and get it out there to the world. It might have a second life under us that you might not have thought was possible previously. So we want to grow with that community. We're hoping that we can approach doing more product in the future, more physical product. Some of course we're already doing some t-shirts. We're probably going to do some more t-shirt related items, and we're hoping that we can also get into some physical product such as toys and games. You know. So those are some of the things that we've got in the works and some of the things where we want to go down. We're hoping, what we hope for the future is that Rising Sun becomes more of a name that you can count in your household, such as, when you bring up Valiant or Dynamite or, Dark Horse. We hope that, oh, well, there's also Rising Sun, and we can continue to grow down those paths.
Well, that's wonderful. Um, I appreciate you taking the time and going into some of these hard discussions, because they are hard discussions in the comic book world, and all these publishers need to have these hard discussions. I'm hoping that they are having them. Um, I appreciate talking about it from my perspective, who's been a lifelong comic fan since I was 6 years old. I probably have more comics than anybody watching this video has, but um, I have a certain perspective on it from all those years of collecting and seeing the industry, being in the middle of the industry as an interviewer, talking to publishers and creators, artists, writers over the decades uh, uh, in this field that I'm doing now. And I I feel that it's very, very important because it can reach a lot of um, people in different ways. I was a child when it reached me, and it helped me through literacy. It helped me through a community where I met other people. It helped me with communication because I was a child of a disability, being deaf as a child, and I've overcome that disability somewhat. And it's helped me in many different facets, and it can help a lot of other people. And I want it to continue into the future. It's a solely American format of entertainment that was created in this country, and I would hate for it to go away. I really would. I love it, and I'll always be a comic book fan. So I really feel sad when I see the things that are happening. And I felt sad in the 90s. Like you could kind of feel the things that were happening as well before the collapse of the industry. Thankfully, they were on their last legs and they were able to survive. But I don't know if the industry is going to survive the next 7 years. By 2030, I have a bad feeling that we're not going to be around unless we do look at some of these ideas that you put forth, some of the ideas that other people are putting forth to try and innovate, pivot, reinvigorate the audience. So thank you very much, Hawk. It's
Oh,
always
oh,
entertaining.
well, thank you. And obviously, as we're wrapping this up, I want to say, guys, hey, if you want to support Rising Sun, go to risingsuncomics.com. Click on their storefront. It'll take you to a different website. That's our publishing hub. And then you can go into our store there. You can find all kinds of books that we publish. You can support us by buying one of those books. And that money helps to continue to move forward. Other things you can do is you can go to your local comic shop and ask for indie publishing books. Ask them to do it. If you've got kids, take your kids to the comic shop. It can be a nice outing. You go for, actually, I was going to say you go for an ice cream, but you better hold the ice cream till after you get out of the comic shop. Go to the comic shop, buy them something, and then go get an ice cream. Go just spend a little bit of time. It shouldn't be too long, hour out of your day, hour and a half, depending on how far you got to go. And those things really help the industry. To support things. Other things you can help with Rising Sun. We have 2 Kickstarters running right now that you really want to be a part of. Action Force Redux is running issue 4A. You can help us fund that book. You can find it on Kickstarter. I'll leave a link down here so you guys can click on it and get there whenever it goes live. You can pick up all kinds of extra goodies, issues 1 through 4, as well as several books that we've actually published over the years. You can pick them up. That'll add to your experience of G.I. Joe. You can also support After Action Report 3. Now, After Action Report is a comics collecting guide for you G.I. Joe fans out there. If you're wanting to know what covers were put out by IDW Publishing, this is it. You can go grab this and see all of the covers that were put out by A Real American Hero line that was written by Larry Hama. We just hit issue 300. It's the last one through IDW. Really good series. Larry's done a great run. There's all kinds of covers, stuff you certainly don't know about. You're going to want to buy one of these. So support the Kickstarter. And if you're there and you're wondering, okay, this is volume 3. How do I get volumes 1 and 2? You can get those as add-ons inside this Kickstarter. That money goes directly back to us, the publisher, so we can do a volume 4, which we all want. I'm certain we want. I want it. And you guys, I'm certain want it too, because there's so much more to cover in G.I. Joe comic collecting. So,
thank you, Hawk. You touched on all the bases that I was gonna touch on. Thank you. I get a hand it to you, professional as always, and I appreciate talking to you, and I look forward to talking to you in the future. New endeavors and new stuff that you have coming up. So. Thank you again very much.
You're welcome, and thank you for having me. I really appreciate it. All right, bye, guys.